This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 1st of February 2022 at home in Wicklow. And the launchpad for this week's discussion was the French director Celine Sciamma's brilliant film Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which is a mid-19th century set drama that focuses on an emerging lesbian love between two women, one of whom is a painter and the other of whom is her subject. And it got me thinking about the power of being seen and the power of being able to see, and the idea of watcher and watchee, if you will. And so I discussed that film in quite a lot of detail, and it does lead me to talk a little about some other films in which female sexuality is presented, and especially lesbian sexuality, and looking at that differently from a male director versus a female director's point of view, and what that does to how it is presented on screen. So there's a couple of interesting movies discussed in that area, and this episode does then recall some of the conversation from last week when I was talking about subjectivity versus objectivity, and it also recalls episode 24, where I spoke about the fear of being seen, and that does play into the conversation today. And I conclude talking about the stakes of no longer being able to recognize what we see and what that does to our sense of self. And I asked the question, if in losing sight of others we also lose sight of ourselves. So all of that is coming up. I hope you find time to listen. I'll see you there. Cheers.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. Welcome. How are you today? Is the sun shining on your little heart? Have you got a little bit of light in your life, keeping you lit, keeping you illuminated, shedding light on what you need to see? Because we need a little bit of light, don't we? I think we do. That's the subject matter of a poem that I'm trying to compose in my head, or have been for the last couple of months. How much light do we need? Because we don't need light. We don't need light all the time, and we don't need all of the light ever, do we? That's something I'll return to, maybe in poetic form. Yeah, there you are. So last week's episode went really well. It's the least it's the least listened to episode of the podcast so far. I'm not sure why. It wasn't a particularly controversial subject, but I think fundamentally it was about, pain management, emotional and psychological pain. So maybe after 2 years of the pandemic, people have had enough. My massive audience has had enough. They're like, here, listen, give it a rest, will you? Give us something lighter. So there you go. I started today's episode with a reference to light. But yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging for me when I go, okay, nobody listened to that one. Nobody in inverted commas. It wasn't nobody. There were a few hits, but I do need to raise my game in how I'm presenting the podcast in the public domain, and apply a little bit more strategy, a bit more thought behind what I put out there. We're living in an age where we're always looking for the next thing, I guess. That might be an absolutely unoriginal thing to say, and maybe people have said that for years. Maybe that idea predates, I'm sure it predates anything to do with the internet or the internet age, the digital age. I speak for us, I speak for humans. So I'm being interviewed by a Martian, and they're like, what are humans like, Dara? We really want to know. I want to go back and tell my fellow aliens. And then we hesitate and we discuss, who is the alien here? If a human arrives on Mars, surely the human is the alien. Now the scientists or the astronomy buffs out there will be like, why is he even referring to Mars as a planet that has aliens? It's absolutely absurd. There's just red dust on that planet, nothing else. So stop it. This story is annoying me. But I'm going to stick with it. So if I land on Mars and all the Martians are like, let's interview the alien. Alien, tell us, who are you? I'm a human. Oh, you're a human. Okay, human, tell us about your fellow humans. And then I would say, well, we like new things. And that's why I've been sent out into the universe to find a new planet for us to live on. And that's why I'm here. And soon several spaceships of battalions of soldiers are going to land here and eradicate your people, your race, so we can occupy your planet. Okay, cool, because we were looking for something new, and your planet seemed like the right way to go, a good starting point for our expansionist vision for the human race. Anyway, I was trying to say before I went on that digression that arguably we always crave something new to stimulate us, and we're living in an age when we are being relentlessly presented with new images. We're living in a very visual age, and we receive so much visual stimulation via the internet and via our gadgets and our devices, and of course we play our own role in this game of presentation. I spoke about this in episode 24, which was 3 months ago. I spoke about this in the episode called The Fallible Smotherboard and the Fear of Being Seen. And I did talk about the impact of social media, the impact of living out our lives, or living out a version of our lives on social media, and the transactionary nature of that, and what we present versus what we choose not to present, and the relationship we develop with images of ourselves and images of our lives, and the relationship we develop with the curation of our lives. And then the transactionary element comes in when we're looking for a response, and we're looking for that approval, that thumbs up, that like, that comment, that reaction. And then we get the dopamine hit, that little rush of, oh, I've been noticed, oh, I've been seen, oh, I'm being liked. And we're not necessarily stopping to reflect on the artificiality of it all, the artifice, it's there's a disconnect from reality because, I mean, essentially, what is it? It's like, if we didn't have the digital equivalent, maybe we'd be meeting in a warehouse, in the biggest warehouse you can conceive, and there's thousands upon thousands of people, thousands upon thousands of people in there with their scrapbooks, holding up their scrapbooks and going, look at this one, look at this one, look, here's me in my underwear, oh look, here's me with my smashed avocado, oh look, here's me with my kitten, oh look, here's a picture of my new shoes, oh look, here's a picture of whatever. And it's just this cacophony of everyone vying for attention, and they've brought their scrapbooks, or maybe the more ambitious people have brought their little home projector and a box of slides and a screen, and they're like, here's my holiday snaps. That's the first person that's going to get killed. Everyone's just going to beat that person to death with scrapbooks. Get out of here, man, with your holiday snaps. We're not interested. In any case, I veered into that territory 3 months ago, and I spoke about transitioning, going through different stages of your life and being vulnerable when you're transitioning from one stage to the next, and not wanting to be seen mid scramble. Like you're scrambling. It's like you're scrambling up a bank. So there's another level on this sort of these kind of tiers of earth, of clay, and it's an angled bank, and you've got to kind of scramble up to get to a level, and then scramble up again to get to the next level. And on each level there's cool things happening, and it's a nice party, and there's good people, or there's a good experience to be had. You don't want to be seen scrambling. You just want to be there in that place. We crave that arrival point. Again, I'm speaking to the Martians. I speak for all humans. Arrival. We want arrival. And we don't want to be seen in the scrambling state. We want to be seen poised, ready for consumption, ready for interaction, integration, the seamless meld into the mass, where we will be embraced and approved of. So anyway, so what more do I have to add to this particular concept around the idea of the visual, around the idea of being seen, around the idea of seeing? And this is the other element of what I've just been talking about, the idea of having an endless procession of images put before us, on our computers, on our phones, wherever we may be. It makes watchers of us all. It makes voyeurs of us all. Now, this is an argument that David Thompson, the film critic, it's a key kind of pillar of his film philosophy, if you will. We will. So this idea of watching film, watching movies as a person sitting in a dark room, and it's a fundamentally sexual position, and one that he unapologetically embraces, that we like to watch. And of course, the being concealed while one watches allows one to entertain the pleasure that one experiences from watching more safely, more privately. And so it's there's a real, there's something, of course, arguably transgressive about that, because you have power, that being hidden and being able to watch, you have power to enjoy your own response, power to allow that response to lead you to other sensations or feelings or actions. And on on a level, this is the similar kind of power we enjoy when we view someone's profile on, Instagram or Facebook. And in fact, I did come across something yesterday. It came up on my, again, the phones. They are programmed to just throw stuff in your face. So you get these little notifications. And Twitter, for some reason, they obviously they're using their algorithms, and they decide, oh, you'll be interested in this, and they pop something up on your screen. And I try to I'm sure I can just deactivate them, but I haven't yet with Twitter. So something came up yesterday, and basically it was a young woman. She's a Catalan student of what, political history, something like that. I saw on her Twitter feed that she'd written a review of, I'm not sure if it was a book or an academic paper. I think it was a book about how the Irish had fought in the Spanish Civil War, and how the Irish had fought against Franco. I think that was fundamentally it. So she was writing a review. It had been written by two Irish guys. Anyway, grand. I'm just trying to give you a background. That's her area. The tweet that was offered up on my phone was her expressing what? Disgust, outrage, horror that she had left her phone in. No, sorry, her boyfriend had left her phone into a phone repair shop, and she got the phone back, but like at 1 a.m, like on Saturday night, 3 guys from the phone shop rang her, and yeah, she was just going like, what the hell is going on? What, on how many levels is this wrong? Extraordinary stuff, really. But again, we have what? The invasiveness, the absolute, of course, lack of professionalism. Her concern was, in a way, her concern didn't seem to be like these guys rang her, although that was obviously concerning enough, and she just blocked their numbers, fine. But her concern was like, what else, apart from getting her phone number, and then using it, what other information did they take from her phone, and with whom did they share it? Now, I'm not sure what I'm not sure what the point is I'm trying to make there, connected to what I've been talking about previously. Just that phones are bad. That's not my point. The internet. Oh God, the internet sounds like such an old fogey term. I don't know why I keep coming back to that. I don't like it. The technology that we're all immersed in, and from which we find it, which, okay, I should stop saying we and speaking for humans and speak for myself. There's an unavoidability, it seems, about the technology that's out there, about big tech, about the tentacles of big tech and their insidious algorithms that infiltrate our lives. As soon as you're using a mobile phone, as soon as you're browsing on Google, you're handing over information. And of course, most websites now allow you to try and opt out of the information that's shared, but they're still finding ways. I'm sure they're still finding ways, and this invasion of privacy is an aspect. So what happened to that young woman? It's an aspect of boundaries being erased, and it's an aspect of that power that I was talking about before, the power of the voyeur, and the willingness to not care about boundaries, to go, oh, that girl, that woman is attractive, and I'm going to ring her up with my mates. Why? What's the end game? To be aggressive, to have a laugh, to just roll the dice and see if a positive outcome can happen. I mean, in the context of recent conversations that I've had around male violence, do we throw that in there as well? Is that an act of male violence? I think logically, you can argue that it is. It's an aspect of that, certainly. The online space isn't safe. I think that's something we can say. As humans, the online space isn't a particularly safe space, and it's a very attritional space, and it's a space where, because people are able to be in that space from the safety of a closed door, from the safety of being behind a closed door, from the safety of being in another country, from the safety of being very much physically removed from the consequences, that people behave abominably online. Nice use of the word abominably. But anyway, look, I didn't know I was going to go to that place. It is connected to the kind of the broader topic I'm interested in talking about. Or it is the broader backdrop of a narrower focus that I want to bring to the discussion today, and and this is the idea of the power of seeing, the power of watching, and the tension between being seen and seeing. And the platform then that I want to kind of launch this conversation off is an absolutely brilliant French film from 2019, which you may have seen. It's called Portrait of a Lady on Fire. The French was Portrait de jeune fille en feu, so Portrait of a Young Girl on Fire. And it's a French movie directed by Celine Sciamma, or Sciamma, Sciamma. And I watched it the other night, and I was like, oh, I know that director's name. What else have I seen by her? And she first came to my attention about 6 years ago. She directed a movie called Girlhood. And in French, that was like bande de filles, like team of girls. And that was set in the suburbs of contemporary Paris, and focused on African French girls and their experience of, growing up, of being teenagers in the diverse and often kind of disenfranchised suburban kind of communities of Paris, the kind of the tower block communities. And it's an absolutely brilliant, that's also an absolutely brilliant film, Girlhood, and well worth checking out because of what it's presenting about female friendship, female maturation, and the way it sort of very positively presented sort of young female identity and vitality and vibrancy and solidarity in the face of many other factors that were against them, like set up against them socially, historically, culturally, economically. And so maybe sometimes a movie like that could fall into social realism, and maybe in the kind of the Ken Loach school, just be gritty, challenging, confronting, grimly realistic, which, they all, and those, the Ken Loach's movies, they stand up really well, and there's a sort of a brutal sort of empathy, or a brutal compassion in Ken Loach's movies that can often be hard to watch. The Girlhood, the other movie of that Celine Sciamma directed, it sort of made different choices, and you came away with a great sense of the sort of the resilience and potential unknown, but the potential kind of positive futures of the characters that she focused on. But that's and it just as I say, like a really kind of vibrant, colourful, strong, in no way kind of sentimental or wishy-washy representation of these young women growing up in Paris at the moment. So worth checking out. But this movie then that I watched the other night, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it couldn't be more different, because it's a period drama set in the 1800s, and it's fundamentally a lesbian romance movie, a lesbian romance period drama, but it is told with such tremendous restraint and precision and space and calmness, without the need to be explicit or without telling. So it's very much a show don't tell movie, and it has this small cast, and it's very much to return to the episode I did before Christmas about female texts and art as a response to erasure, and to take that phrase that Doireann na Gríofa really homed in on in her book A Ghost in the Throat of a female text. This is very much a female text, and it's very much female space. And the director, I'll copy in, I'll throw in a link for an interview with the director where she kind of breaks down her thinking and what she was attempting to do with the movie. Watch the movie first though before you read the interview maybe. She wanted to represent on screen a sort of a sisterhood. So in that regard, it is a nice companion piece to Girlhood, because she speaks about sorority and female only spaces, and the premise of the story is simple. A wealthy woman employs a painter to do a portrait of her daughter, who she wants to marry off to an Italian, aristocrat, and the daughter is sort of in a state of depression, and the painter who has been employed is a woman, and has been told by the mother, you can't be seen to paint her. She's not going to pose for you. She doesn't want that. You're going to have to do this surreptitiously. So you're going to be a sort of a companion, and then you're going to have to kind of really steal your looks, and then go back and do the painting secretively when you're not with my daughter. And so that is basically the setup. The mother is played by Valeria Golino, who to English-speaking audiences would be known from Rain Man, like 1988. She was Tom Cruise's girlfriend in that, who, is a very sympathetic character in that movie, and sort of opens maybe a window in the Tom Cruise character's mind to view his autistic brother with a bit more tenderness or openness or love. She was also in the spoof movies Hot Shots with Charlie Sheen, and then I remember her from an Italian movie from, it's over 20 years ago now, Respiro, where she was a woman living on an Italian island in like a small village on the island, and she was just more than the locals could handle because she was so impulsive and prone to exuberant flights of fancy, and gadding about, not behaving, not behaving as they deemed fit. A really nice performance. But in any case, she plays the mother in this movie, and I didn't recognise her at first, and it's like, oh my goodness, Valeria Golino, looking a little bit like one of the Cusack sisters, the Irish actresses, one or two of whom would be maybe a similar age. In any case, the movie really explores then the sort of the tension of attraction, and the tension of this idea of being seen, and the power of the watcher. And of course, over the course of the story, the two women in question gradually fall in love, and it's just done really, really well. It's, as I say, I mean, I come back to that word, restrained, and there's a bit of a set piece towards the middle of the movie where they're out at night. They're with the maid, who is the other woman who features quite prominently in the story, and they're out at a sort of it's a festival. There's a bonfire burning. It's nighttime, and it's all women. There. There's no men. So again, you've got this kind of women-only space, and they're all working women. So the painter she's in her own category of what she's allowed to do. The woman that she's doing the portrait of is an aristocrat, and so higher up. So there's these dynamics of class and status, and the sort of social and the socio-political kind of implications of status, of what it is to be a woman, what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. I mean, that recalls the discussion of The Last Duel from a couple of episodes ago, the Ridley Scott movie, about the woman who's trying to have her honour avenged by her husband in medieval France. So in any case, there's this amazing set piece at this nighttime festival out in it's out in the countryside, because they're on an island. I think it's Brittany, and this is maybe a bit of a directorial flourish by the director, where suddenly the women begin this sort of what sounds initially really ominous, a sort of a droning, open vocal sound that sounds, almost horror, laden with horror. But it morphs into a sort of a chant and into this kind of lovely, impromptu choral piece, which is most unexpected, but I found it very effective. And again, it speaks to the confidence of the director, and the mastery of tone, that it wasn't excessively jarring. And there's a couple of other visual things that she does in the movie that are interesting. But in any case, it's a really interesting and lovely film, and beautifully shot, with a lot of kind of muted tones and soft light. So it's not, sometimes when we think of period dramas, like everything is extremely ornate and lavish, and it's like it's like costume porn and set design porn. This is not the case. It's very controlled and deliberate, and I think that is often the hallmark of great movie makers, that there's nothing accidental on screen, that everything has a purpose, everything has its place, everything is either moving plot forward or evoking something that is going to take us to the sort of the emotional payoff of the story. And this movie is very, very much in that area. Really, really, really nicely done. Just on the physical intimacy of the two characters, I think it's always interesting when you see female directors working with sex scenes, because there's often a very different energy, a very different sort of dynamic that comes into play. And this film is very much about the absence of the male gaze. It's very much about the presence of the female gaze and what the female gaze permits, and a sort of an equality, an equality of status. So even though socially the characters in the movie are, from different strata of society, there is, in the absence of men, there's a sort of an equality of the feminine, an equality of womanhood, and that extends to the servant girl as well, the maid, who has her own storyline, which is very, very kind of central to the emerging love and the growth of and strengthening and deepening of the connection between our two protagonists. And it's really only in the presence of the mother, who is older and very much the power holder in the story, in terms of, because it's her, the painter is in her employ, and that's when you get maybe a more traditional power dynamic being presented. Although there is I won't. No spoilers. I'm not gonna ruin it. There's just a nice moment at the end of the film between the painter and the mother. That's all I'll say. But in any case, it is interesting. It's always striking to me, because obviously, if you go through certainly the history of a lot of mainstream American and British movies, English language movies, we're talking about a lot of male directors directing sex scenes, conventional sort of the kind of the hetero sex scene, and it's a very particular thing, and the pressure on actresses to disrobe, to show themselves, to show their naked bodies. That's an old story in Hollywood, and it can be, there's a lot of power wrapped up in that, because we're not, because of censorship laws, you weren't showing kind of full frontal nudity of men, but there was always the desire to present women and to objectify beautiful actresses. And so, the male gaze, there is that objectification, and there is that that power dynamic at play, which, if you kind of step away and kind of go, what did the actress agree to do? And of course, there are horrible stories about how the actress's trust was betrayed, and how actresses have been manipulated by directors and actors conspiring I think I referred to it in another episode. I mean, most infamously between, in Bernardo Bertolucci's Last Tango in Paris, where he and Marlon Brando conspired to manipulate Maria Scheider in the controversial sex scene in that movie, which doesn't, again, this I'm steering myself into the discussion about kind of art versus the artist. Can you love the art and condemn the artist? I don't know. I mean, I just think, for me, that space, and it doesn't have to be just an arts space or a movie set. I think if you're in a position of power, the exploitation or manipulation of those who are not in a position of power it's just immoral. It's I just don't think it's on any level. Now, I don't want to be too kind of zealous about it or puritanical. I think a director's job, one of the jobs of a director, of course, if we stay specifically with kind of acting, is to help an actor get to a place that they might not be able to get to by themselves. But I'm thinking more from a sort of a psychological or emotional frame of reference, to help them access something in the character that's going to bring out a richer performance. I'm not talking about, I'll help you get naked, I'll help you show your breasts, or I'll help you, remove your underwear. That's not what I'm talking about. But in any case, to go back to Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the relationship between the two women and the sexual relationship that ensues is fully consensual. It's extremely respectful. It is not lacking in passion. It is not lacking in eroticism. And it works really well. And if you compare that to, say, I'm just trying to recall the name of that French movie from a few years ago. Is it Blue is the Warmest Colour? I'm actually gonna quickly look that up on mic. Dun dun dun. But in that movie, I'm pretty sure it was called Blue is the Warmest Colour. Yeah, Blue is the Warmest Colour, which was 2013. And that was, I think it was based on a graphic novel. And that featured extremely explicit lesbian sex scenes between the two main characters. And that was directed by a man, Abdelatif Kechiche, and my recollection is that was not a particularly happy set, and that he really drove his actresses to the brink of of consent, and of artistic consent, because he pushed them so hard in that area of being explicit. Now, it's ultimately, I think the film does work because there is an integrity to the story, and it is about sexual awakening, and so that is relevant. But again, if you're talking about what did those, what were those actresses willing to do? What had they actually signed up for? And how much were they then coerced to do or manipulated to do? But again, you can watch the film and make up your own mind. But what's my argument? It's not an argument, but I think if Celine Sciamma had directed Blue is the Warmest Colour, you'd be looking at a very different movie. And so you do call into question, what is the director's objective? So the Kechiche, the director of Blue is the Warmest Colour, was he satisfying his own desire to see these women up on screen? was he getting off himself on directing them to those extremes? There's a different agenda, and if you take another female directed movie with a sex scene, In the Cut by Jane Campion from 2013, no, not 2013, 2003, sorry. In the Cut features a sex scene between Meg Ryan and Mark Ruffalo. It's a, and it's a sort of a psychological thriller, mystery, romance. There's a bit of romance in there because the Meg Ryan character falls for this cop who's a homicide detective, played by Mark Ruffalo. And I remember watching it at the time, and there's a sex scene between them, and I remember thinking, okay, this isn't directed by a man, because the man was very much, the Mark Ruffalo character was very much in the sexual service of the Meg Ryan character. And again, you kind of, it was striking because you realize, oh yeah, we don't see this much. We don't see that desire to to give pleasure to the female character, from a straight, from her male lover. It's a less common presentation. Another, just staying in this area for the moment, of female sexuality and gay female sexuality, lesbian sexuality. A really interesting film from 2014 is The Duke of Burgundy, directed by Peter Strickland, an English director. And what we have in this one is it's a really quirky, atmospheric sort of psychodrama, featuring a sadomasochistic relationship between these two women, consensual, but one is the dominant and one is the submissive, and we're brought into the world not knowing what's going on, but the women are enacting these role plays, and it's again a very beautifully shot movie with lots of sort of muted colours, very atmospheric. And you have then, of course, very explicitly with a sadomasochistic relationship, an exploration of power and sexuality, and how in the story of that movie, how that sadomasochism stops working, like it places a strain on the emergent attraction, or it places a strain that the existing attraction or love can't quite withstand. But it again, it works really well. The actress, she's Danish, I think, isn't she? Sitze Babett Knudsen. She was in what was that Scandinavian? One of those first big Scandinavian series that really broke the whole Scandi noir. It was the political one. Oh, I didn't watch it. That's why I can't remember the name of it. We're probably talking 10 years ago. It was hugely popular. Was there a female prime minister of Denmark, or did the main character ascend to become the leader of Denmark? Anyway, it's that actress. That's who I'm talking about. I've just gone blank on that show. Anyway, whatever. I can look that up in a heartbeat. But in any case, so there's an example of a movie that goes against what I'm saying, where a male director can present something. A male director can present the lesbian sexuality in a way that works and doesn't seem manipulative or exploitative. That series was Borgen. That's the one I was trying to remember. Anyway, there you go. So, yes, the male gaze is referenced explicitly in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, because there's a sequence in this story where The young aristocrat, she is reading to the painter and to the servant girl while the mother is away for a few days. She reads the story of Orpheus and Eurydice, which basically is the story from Greek mythology of how Orpheus descends to Hades to try to save the woman he's in love with, the beautiful Eurydice. And he convinces Hades to allow him to take Eurydice back to the surface, back to the world, to the human world. And his only condition is you have to lead her out of Hades, out of hell, and you must never look back at her before you reach the human world. And Orpheus agrees, but just as they're about to get to the human world, he can't stop himself from looking back, whether he hears Eurydice say something, or he just wants to check that she's okay, or he can't resist looking at her. And the second he looks at her, she just sort of vaporizes, and she's taken back to Hades, and that's the end of her. And again, if you read Celine Sciamma, she kind of says, well, that's it, isn't it? The male gaze kills her, which is like, whoa, that's quite extreme, isn't it? But it's as that story is woven into the narrative of the movie, it works really well, because you got the three women with their kind of differing perspectives on the significance of the myth. And, you know, was Orpheus heartbroken? Was it a terrible mistake? Or on some level, did he want to lose Eurydice? Did he want her to die? Because then he would be able to remember her in that perfect form forever, and not have to watch her grow old and lose her feminine vitality and her beauty. He wouldn't have to see her age and become unattractive. And that's that's one way to look at that. It's one way to look at that myth. Orpheus, you know, he couldn't do what he was asked to do. He didn't have the discipline. He didn't have the discipline not to look. And so that's an interesting idea, the power to not look. And I'm going to argue, to go back to the idea of the amount of stuff we consume visually nowadays. The question is, and the challenge is, do you have the power not to look? Do you have the power to avert your eyes? Do you have the power to simply put the phone away, put the phone down, you know, just shut it down? And I think, you know, like, and this is the thing, part of that question is also, what do you choose to look at? What do you choose to look at? And to bring it into to bring it back to the, as always with me, to bring it back to the area of wellness, of personal responsibility, of agency, of personal insight. Are you thinking about what you look at in terms of how it affects you, in terms of how it affects your sense of wellness? And as I've mentioned before, I've been a reluctant visitor to the world of social media. Really, you know, only since starting the podcast have I, and I mean, I'm not going to use the word immersed, because I haven't immersed myself, and maybe that's part of the problem, in terms of trying to promote, the podcast. I find the likes of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, because they're the ones that I'm using to try and raise the profile of the podcast. I find myself on them, and you'll click on something, you're interested in, and I try to use them sort of organically to go, oh, that person's interested in wellness. Oh, they have a platform, or they've got something, maybe there's a point of connection here. Maybe there's a point of commonality, one in which we find ourselves in agreeance, and then we can step off together, or I can attract traffic to the podcast based on an interaction with that person's platform. And I think that's partly the idea of a social network. Obviously, that's one way it works. But there's so much else that you end up clicking on. And, I'm I'm no less susceptible than anybody else to click on, pictures of cats and things like that. And polar bears. I found polar bears the other day. But ultimately, it's just this kind of aggravant. And it's this... I recognized a few years ago that I had to stop eating kind of junky sweets, because apart from wrecking my teeth and gums and being completely unhealthy, that initial hit of wallowing in the sugar rush, it just really left me with such a kind of a negative kind of reaction in my brain. It sat in such a sort of a soiled a soiled place that I was like, I've got to stop doing this. This is it's just not doing it. It's not doing anything good for me. Not in the long term. The sustainable benefits of eating Skittles have yet to be proven. I haven't seen the research, but I'm pretty sure eating, a couple of bags of sour opal fruits, or they're called Starburst now, aren't they? So the sweets formerly known as opal fruits. The research, I haven't seen it, but I doubt it's good. In any case, to bring it back to what we're consuming, for me then, my argument is that the social media thing, the consumption of the consumption of that content is the same as eating the fizzy sweets. It's the same as eating the bag of sherbet. And while you're kind of going initially, yum, yum, eventually you're going, oh my God, I feel unwell. And, what we choose to look at then is part of that. So it takes discipline to go, boom, I'm just going to disconnect here and switch off. And to add to what's not good about that, there's I referred to this earlier, there's the artificiality of it. There's the sort of two-dimensionality of it, which is completely, that's hitting a part of the brain that is not, it's not satisfying the way being immersed in nature, for a very obvious counterpoint. But you'd actually be better off, getting a bowl of fruit and looking at the bowl of fruit for 10 minutes. That would do more for you. Just to aesthetically immerse yourself in a bowl of apples with a bunch of grapes and a banana and 2 satsumas and a little kiwi fruit and maybe a grapefruit, all in the bowl. Look at them. I'm feeling calmer already, even talking about them. So that's what I'm going to do now as part of my, my daily routine. I'm going to assemble my fruit. Not a euphemism. I'm going to assemble my fruit and stare at it But again, organic, three-dimensional, something sensory, something I can touch, something I can hold, something I can smell. This is a way to center ourselves. It's a way to calm ourselves. It's a way to return to the body and to get away from the jibber jabber, the congestion of the visual as presented in the online space, and that's a positive thing. Surely that's a positive thing. Come on. And now, okay, look, you might go, look, this is not relevant to me. I'm not living in that world. My fear is, while that might be true on a level, my fear is we are all living in that world, because that is the world we live in now. That is the nature of the world. That is the nature of how far reaching the tentacles of tech have extended themselves into our very selves. But anyway, so I'm gonna conclude today's episode with just a little bit of an exploration then of this is bringing up some of the things I've touched on already today, but this idea of seeing ourselves, and again, just to recall an idea I mentioned in the episode from November, episode 24, when we're endlessly presented with the social media frame. Here's the Instagram post, here's the Facebook post, here's my photos. We are being invited to constantly sort of center ourselves in the frame, to put ourselves into the middle of the picture and then await reaction. And it's a fundamentally unhealthy dynamic, because that's fine. You can kind of go, well, hold on a second. If we're taking this back into the analog world, and you've got your little stack of photos, and you meet your friend and go, oh yeah, here's some photos I just took, or here's photos from our holiday, and there's 5 minutes less, a few minutes of just flicking through photographs, and then they're put away, and you're back in the real world. The impact of that is not the same as having 24-hour access to either the consumption of other people's images or and again I use the word curation, I'll use it again, the curation of your own image. And I see that. I mean, I see that a lot in the online space. And I mean, I'm doing it myself in terms of, I have my mug up as part of the branding of the podcast, and I'm doing a little bit of in my tentative social media engagement. I am using my own image every now and again, and I do a little video every week to summarize the podcast. But then I kind of walk away and I don't think about it again. I sort of drop it, which feels like the good way to go for me. Although I have the only other person who's involved in anything connected to the podcast, my friend Daniel in Australia, who helps me with the branding. I think he's going to be pushing me in a different direction to try and utilize these platforms more. I'm reluctant, but I think it's going to be a necessary evil. But in any case, the point I was going to make is, over time, I think the effect on our sense of self is is not good. Is not good. What happens is we become very, very kind of conscious of how we're perceived. Now, when I say that sentence, I'm thinking, well, when's the last time you felt like that? Because typically that's a very adolescent state of mind, the self-consciousness of, of growing up, the self-consciousness of being exposed. And one of the reasons the adolescent kind of sensibility is often so sort of excruciatingly self-conscious and tortured is because of the sense of loss of control, the sense of, I don't know what my body is doing, and I don't know what my voice is doing, and I've got these feelings that I cannot control, and these hormonal impulses, and I feel a sort of a dysmorphia. I feel unformed, malformed. I feel distorted, and that is a state of discomfort, and that is a state of alienation. And because of that brings the feeling of extreme self-consciousness. How am I seen? How am I coming across? And it's my contention that that's what social media does to us, regardless of our age. If we're someone who's living in that space and spending a lot of time, presenting ourselves in that space, the effect is not dissimilar. And so I think in terms of wellness, the more we can become aligned with ourselves, the more we have a sense of self-possession, and the more we have a sense of knowing who we are, the less we need to care about how we're perceived, and the less we need to care about how we're seen. And this is a very important point. And there is, there are passionate sort of thinkers on this area of naturally we are built to be unable to see ourselves. Like the physical, anatomical setup of the human body and of all animals, really. That's okay. I need David Attenborough to chime in here to correct me. But, we're designed to look outwards. We're not designed to look inwards. That's probably not entirely correct. We're not designed to be able to remove our eyeballs. So let's say a little bit like that quite horrific image from Pan's Labyrinth, where the little girl is being pursued by the monster through that tunnel, out of which she can escape from the underworld, and that monstrous figure removes his eyes and puts them in the palms of his hands so he can see, and then of course you could turn those palms on yourself to see yourself. We're not designed to do that. So we're not designed to view ourselves objectively. That's for other people to do. Now, I spoke last week about objectivity and subjectivity and the power. My argument last week was that if we can accept that our viewpoint is very subjective, and then also accept that everyone else's viewpoint is subjective, and accept that there's an implied flaw and an implied unreliability in those competing viewpoints, then that perhaps will encourage us to let go of our anxiety around other people's views of us, and to trust our own view of our reality. So, that is also then, again, like if that is a visual sense, I'm not sure. That's part of it, of course. For me, that's more the internal eye and the internal, the mind that we bring to our sense of self, the mind that we bring to our reality, the mind that we bring to our narrative. But I wanted to kind of go to the point, and this brings back to kind of the adolescent mindset, that there is, of course, a vulnerability in feeling we can't align ourselves. So that sense of, I don't have control of self. I don't have control of my body, my feelings, my thoughts. And if that is the, if that is the reference point from which I view the world, like if that's the physical arrangement of self aligned with the mental perception of self, if those things being in check and being in the right place is what allows me to position myself in life, and then to understand how I relate to others, and then that itself is a form of world building, and that's a form of I was going to say certitude, but well, maybe that's okay. I mean, what I'm trying to say, it's a means of making the world solid, and then that's a mechanism for recognition, and in that regard, it's a form of world building. And so the question then is, the idea, if we bring this back then, and I'm wrapping up with this, if we bring this back to the idea of what we see and who we see, and then who sees us and what we're seen by, that these are sort of fixed ideas, and there's a sort of a linear sort of transaction that happens as one gaze meets another gaze, one set of eyes meets another set of eyes, and then that's what passes between us is, I see you, you see me, therefore we're here, therefore this is real. And the visual becomes a conduit then for something will pass between us now. And in the movie Portrait of a Girl on Fire, what passes between those two women becomes love, becomes desire, becomes an incredible sort of bond and attraction and kind of magnetism of desire. But what happens then when we lose sight of that which we know? What happens when we lose sight of others? Because if others become our reference points, if others become the ways that we verify our truths, if we lose sight of that, perhaps we lose sight of ourselves. And that is a very fearful sort of place. And it was interesting, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I might throw in the link for that as well. I was listening to one of Adam Buxton's podcasts, so I think it's just called the Adam Buxton podcast, and he was interviewing Billy Connolly a couple of years ago. It was just before the pandemic, and it was a bit of a review of Billy Connolly's kind of life and times and his career. Of course, Billy Connolly does he have Parkinson's disease? Is that it? But he was incredibly funny and jolly and truthful. I've always liked Billy Connolly. He always comes across really well. He's just very much himself. But he told a story about seeing Robin Williams, obviously before he died, and how they went out for dinner. They'd been pals for a long time. They'd met way back in the start of their careers, and they'd remained very good friends over the years. And they went out for dinner in America somewhere, and Billy Connolly thought Robin Williams wasn't really kind of in great shape, looking a bit haggard, and he'd been kind of drinking again, and Billy Connolly expressed concern, and Robin Williams assured him he was okay. And they parted ways that night, but before they parted ways, Robin Williams said to Billy Connolly, "You know I love you, don't you?" And Billy Connolly was like, "Yeah, of course I do, of course I do." And that was grand, and off they went. And again, Billy Connolly was relaying this story in the podcast, and he said, yeah, 2 days later, Robin Williams was dead. He'd taken his own life. And what struck me listening to that story again, and again thinking about this idea of being seen, the certitude we gain from this sort of visual game of recognition, being seen by others, seeing them. Robin Williams had been diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, and it seems to be quite an aggressive form of dementia and brain disease, brain deterioration, and he had been experiencing a lot of the symptoms, it would seem, prior to deciding to kind of take his own life. And I think I was reflecting on it, kind of going, well, there was somebody who knew he was going to lose that facility of recognition, that facility of understanding the world through seeing others and being seen by others, because that, of course, is an aspect of dementia where the sufferer will cease to remember people that they've known all their lives. And I mean, again, it's, I have no idea what was in Robin Williams's head, but presumably that prospect was perhaps in his, was factored into his desire to end his own life. And Lewy body dementia, is not something that's curable, and so it would have been extremely daunting for someone who had such a brilliant kind of mind and a brilliant facility for that sort of mental kind of alacrity and acuity, and the facility, obviously his facility for comedy was hugely a part of that brain function. And so, yeah, he was really going to be hit where it hurt. In any case, look, that's it. I'm making a habit of this. I'm making a habit of finishing the podcast with a sort of a depressing story. So I apologise. Robin Williams, I don't know. He was kind of a genius, wasn't he? Is that word overused? I think he was. He struggled for a long time to find the right kind of movie vehicle for his talent, but he got there in the end. And we've got here in the end. It is the end of this particular episode. So I hope you've got something out of this. It was a bit of a movie heavy one today. I had a friend tell me recently, nah, she's not really into the movie ones. She said, I hate the movie ones. They're terrible. She didn't say that. I could have chosen to hear it that way, but I didn't, because I'm a big boy. I'm a grown up and I could handle it. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Not for you. But she likes other ones. And I hope she knows who she is. She knows who she is. I'm going to call her Dolores. Even though that's not your name, Dolores. You know what your name is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, Dolores. I hope you enjoyed this one. And I hope you'll go and watch that movie. And maybe those other movies I mentioned, because they're great. And I think you were great too. And thanks for listening, because I know you're a regular listener. Okay, that's it. I'm going to leave it there. As always, you can, and I'd love if you did this. I would love it. I'm quoting Kevin Keegan there. Do you know who Kevin Keegan is? He was a footballer, and then he was a football manager, and there was a guy who wore his heart on his sleeve, and he would love it if his team beat Man United. That's what he said back then, and they didn't, and then they lost the championship. There you go, poor old Kev. But I would love it if you threw me some love on social media. So after advocating, get the hell off social media, I'm saying, get on there. Tell everyone how much you love this podcast, if you do. Tell everyone how much you're enjoying it, if you are. And you can do that on Twitter at the ClearOut2. That's number 2, ClearOut2. You can do it on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook at the Clear Out Podcast. So yeah, tell your pals. Come on over. Let's have a listen. And if you want to throw some financial support at the show, because this is an independent podcast, as you can tell, there isn't an ad in sight. You can do so using the supporter link wherever you're listening to this podcast, or using the Patreon link, which is patreon.com/theclearout. And there will be a link for that also where you're listening to this podcast. So that's it. You take care of yourself, okay? Stay safe. Watch out. Use those eyes. Use those eyes for good. Think about what you're using those eyes to look at. Think about your gaze. Is it a male gaze? Are you killing women with that gaze? Is it a female gaze? What are you allowed to look at? That's a good one too. Okay. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. I'll be back real soon. All the best. Take care. Bye.